Right, a new day again. Today is 2nd September 2020. Um, and I did yesterday, I read it yesterday. I feel pretty comfortable. I felt pretty comfortable. My daughter asked me, how about your reading the human of human bondage? I told her, oh, not that hard as I thought. So I can pretty go through the material. So let's do it today. And I think I can improve a lot, um, you know, reading. And this is the 20th day. So now let's begin. Yesterday we read here. Mm. In summer, Mrs. Carey. In summer, Mrs. Carey, when she was making jam, often asked her for a copy to cover the pots with. When the vicar settled down to his paper, he put on a bonnet and went out to do the shopping. Put on her bonnet，类似披肩的东西吧。哦，帽子啊，无边的帽子。Bonnet. I think I read it right. Control V.
Bonnet.
无边的帽子，但是我想它应该是有边的帽子吧。Bonnet.
Bonnet.
Bonnet. And went out to do the shopping. Philip accompanied her. Blackstable was a fishing village. It consisted of a high street in which were the shops, the bank, the doctor's house, and the houses of 2 or 3 owners. Round the little harbour were shabby streets in which lived fishermen and exhibition 靠怎么跑这儿来了 and poor people. But since they went to chapel, they were of no account. They went to chapel, they were of no account. Oh. But since they went to chapel, they were of no account. 这个去掉。When Mrs. Carey passed the dissenting minister in the street, ministers in the street, she stepped over to the other side to avoid meeting them. But if there was no time for this, fixed her eyes on the pavement. It was a scandal to which the vicar had never resigned himself that there were 3 chapels in the high street. It was a scandal to which the vicar had never resigned himself that there were 3 chapels in the high street. He could not help feeling that the law should have stepped in to prevent their erection. Shopping in resigned himself that there were 3 chapel 是教堂吗 ？3 chapel， too slow 得进3次吧？是的，小教堂。could not help feeling that the law should have stepped in to prevent their erection. Shopping in was not a simple matter, for decent helped by the fact that the parish church was 2 miles from the town was very common, and it was necessary to deal only with churchgoers. Churchgoers. Churchgoer. 看看是不是
Churchgoer.
Churchgoer. I don't think. Churchgoers. It was necessary to deal only with churchgoers. Mrs. Carey knew perfectly that vicarage custom might make all the difference to a tradesman's faith. There were two butchers. There were 2 butchers who went to church, and they would not understand that vicar could no meal with both of them at once. Nor were they satisfied with his simple plan of going for 6 months to one and for 6 months to the other. Nor were they satisfied with his simple plan of going for 6 months to one and for 6 months to the other. The butcher who was now sending meat to the vicarage constantly threatened not to go to church, was obliged to make a threat. It was very wrong of him not to come to church, but if he carried iniquity further and actually went to chapel, then of course, excellent as his meat was, Mr. Carey would be forced to leave him forever. Inequality. Oh, carried.
Iniquity.
Further. 邪恶. If he carried iniquity further and actually went to chapel, then of course, excellent as his meat was, Mr. Carey would be forced to leave him forever. Mrs. Carey often stopped at the bank to deliver a message to Joshua Greaves, the manager, who was Troy master, treasurer, and church wonder, and church warden,教会委会
Church warden.
Church warden 教会委员 教会委员。He was a tall, thin man with a shallow face and a long nose. His hair was very white, and to Philip, he seemed extremely old. He kept the parish accounts, arranged, arranged the treats for the Keogh toil. Toil? No, choir. Oh my
choir,
God. Choir. 唱诗班. Yes, I know that. Choir. Choir master. 唱诗班. Arranged the treat for the choir under the school, though there was no organ. No organ in the parish church. It was generally considered in Blackstable that the choir he led was the best in Kent, and when there was any ceremony, such as a visit from the bishop, for confirmation, or from the rural dean to preach at the harvest thanksgiving, he made the necessary preparation, but doing all manner of things without more than a perfunctory consultation with the vicar. Perfunctory. Perfunctory. 敷衍的. Oh, perfunctory.
perfunctory,
Perfunctory. Perfunctory 敷衍的. 敷衍 No, no. 敷衍的. Perfunctory consultation. Consultation. Is it consultation? Yes, consultation. 商议，磋商，商议。He had no hesitate in doing all manner of things without he had no hesitation in doing all manner of things without more than a perfunctory consultation with the vicar, and the vicar, though always ready to be saved trouble, much resent the churchwarden's managing way. He really seemed to look upon himself as the most important person in the parish. Mr. Curry constantly told his wife that if Joshua Grieve did not take care, he would give him a good rap. 哦，突然说出，大声说出来。Over the knuckle one day. Knuckle. I need to. 指关节。Rap 大声说出。大声说出。A good rap over the knuckle one day over the knuckle， 跟他发脾气，大概是这个意思。But Mrs. Carey advised him to bear with Joshua Greaves. He meant well, and it was not his fault if he was not quite a gentleman. The vicar, finding him comfort in the practice of a Christian virtue, exercised forbearance, but he revenged himself by calling the churchwarden Bismarck behind him back. But he revenged himself by calling the churchwarden Bismarck. Is it Bismarck a word? Bismarck. Oh, Bismarck. Oh, Bismarck. Bismarck. Okay. Bismarck. Yeah, Bismarck. Bismarck behind his back. Once there had been a serious quarrel between the pair, and Mrs. Carey still thought of that anxious time with dismay. 焦虑 dismay with dismay. Mrs. Carey still thought of that anxious time with dismay. The conservative candidate, the conservative candidate The Conservative candidate had announced his intention of addressing a meeting at Blackstable, and Joshua Greaves having arranged that it should take place in the Mission Hall, went to Mr. Carey, and told him that he hoped he would say a few words. It appeared that the candidate had asked Joshua Greaves to take the chair. This was more than Mr. Carey could put up with. Take the chair, I think that means in charge of something. He had firm views upon the respect which was due to the clothes. It was ridiculous for a churchwarden to take the chair at a meeting when the vicar was there. He reminded Joshua Greaves that parson meant person. Person meant person, that is, the vicar was the person of the parish. Joshua Greaves answered that he recognized the dignity of the church, but this was a matter of politics, and in his turn, he reminded the vicar that they are blessed Severe had enjoined upon them to render unto Caesar the things that were Caesar's. Oh, to render unto render 致使造成给予
Render.
render 致使 that their blessed Savior had enjoined upon them to render upon Casa 致使给予致使给予 unto Casa the things that were is this 凯撒 Yeah, it is 凯撒
Caesar.
Okay. Unto Caesar the things that were Caesar's. To he replied that the devil could quote scripture to his purpose. Scripture 经文 could quote scriptures to his purpose. Himself had sole authority over the mission hall. Replied that the devil could quote scripture to his purpose, had sole authority over the mission hall, and he was not asked to be chairman. He would refuse the use of it for a political meeting. Joshua Reeve himself had sole authority over the mission hall, and if he were not asked to be chairman, he could refuse the use of it for a political meeting. Joshua Reeve told Mr. Curry that he might do as he chose, and for his part, he thought the Wailing Chapel would be an equally suitable place. Then Mr. Curry said that if Joshua Reeve set foot in what was little better than a heathen temple, he was not fit to be churchwarden in a Christian parish. Joshua Reeves resigned all his offices and that very evening sent to the church for his cassock and surplice. Cassock. Oh, is it cassock? Cassock. Cassock. That's so funny. 长袍 cassock and surplice 看起来白色法衣哦，它也有个 surplus
Surplus.
His sister, Miss Greaves, who kept house for him, gave up her secretaryship of the maternity to provide the pregnant poor with flannel, baby line coats, and 5 shillings, which provide. I need to check this. Dine. Linen.
Linen.
linen, linen, linen,
linen,
linen, linen,
linen,
linen, flannel, baby linen, coats and 5 shillings. Mr. Curry said he was at last master in his own house, but soon he found that he was obliged to see to all sorts of things that he knew nothing about. And Joshua Grieve, after the first moment of irritation, discovered that he had lost his chief interest in life. Mrs. Carey and Miss Greaves were much distressed by the quarrel. They met after a discreet exchange of letters. After a discreet谨慎的哦
discreet,
discreet 谨慎的 They met after a discreet exchange of letters, and made up their minds to put the matter right. They talked, one to her husband, the other to her brother, from morning till night. And since they were persuading, these gentlemen to do what in their hearts they wanted, after 3 weeks of anxiety, a reconciliation was effected. It was to both their interests, but they ascribed, it to be a common love for their Redeemer. Reconciliation, reconciliation,
reconciliation,
reconciliation 和解。Reconciliation was effected. It was to both them interests, but they ascribed it ascribe it
ascribe,
ascribe ascribe it to, but they ascribe it to a common love for their Redeemer. Right. Redeemer
redeemer,
救世主 Redeemer 救世主 OK 救世主 but they ascribe it to a common love for their Redeemer. The meeting was held at the mission hall, and the doctor was asked to be chairman. Okay. Mr. Curry and Joshua Grieve both made speeches. When Mrs. Curry had finished her business with the banker, she generally went upstairs to have a little chat with his sister. And while the ladies talked of uh, parish matter, the curate or the new bonnet of Mrs. Wilson. Mr. Wilson was the richest man in Blackstable here, and he had married his cook. Philip said, let's see, oh, the curate, the curate 叫曲牧师，
curate, curate,
副牧师 curate 叫曲牧师。教区牧师。The new bonnet of Mr. Wilson was the richest man in Blackstable. He was thought to have at least 500 a day, and he had married his cook. Philip said Damley in Steve Bella demurely
demurely,
demurely
demurely,
demure 装成端庄 demurely 装成端庄的。Sit demurely in the stiff parlor. Stiff parlor 客厅。Stiff parlor parlor
parlor,
parlor Stiff parlor used only to receive visitors, and busied himself with the restless movement of goldfish in a bowl. The windows were never opened except to air the room for a few minutes in the morning, and it had a stuffy smell to Philip to have a mysterious connection with banking. Then that she had to go to the grocer, and they continued their way. When the shopping was done, they often went down a side street of little houses, mostly of wood, in which fishermen devoured, and here and there a fisherman sat on his doorstep mending his nets, and the nets hung to dry upon the door, in which fishermen devoured until they came to a small beach, shut in one each side by warehouses, but with a view of the sea. Mrs. Curry stood for a few minutes and looked at it. It was turbid and yellow, and who knows what thoughts passed through her mind, while Philip searched for flight stone to play ducks and drakes. Ducks and drakes. 公鸭. Okay. To play ducks and drakes. Okay. Um, till they came to a small beach, shut in each side by warehouse, but with a view of the sea. Mrs. Carey stood for a few minutes and looked at it. It was turbid and yellow, and who knows what thought passed through her mind. Well, Philip to play ducks and drakes. Then they walked slowly back. They looked into the post office to get the right time, nodded to Mrs. Wigram, the doctor's wife, who sat at her window sewing, and so got home. Dinner was at 1 o'clock, and on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday it consisted of beef, roast, hashed, and minced, and on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of mutton. Dinner was at 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. And on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday it consisted of beef, roast, hashed, and minced. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday of mutton. Mutton 是什么？羊肉，羊肉。哦，mutton。哦，绵羊。On Sunday, they ate one of their own chicken. In the afternoon, Philip did his lessons. He was taught Latin and mathematics, but his uncle, who knew neither, and French and the piano well enough, ignorant, 忽略 no ignorant 无知的 ignorant 那怎么教啊？无知 of French she was ignorant, but she knew the piano well enough to accompany the old-fashioned songs. She had sung for 30 years. Uncle William used to tell Philip that when he was a curate, his wife had known 12 songs by heart, which she could sing at a moment of notice whenever she was asked. She often sang still when there was a tea party at the vicarage. There were few people whom the Careys cared to ask there, and their parties consisted always of the curate Joshua Greaves, with his sister, Dr. Wigram, and his wife. After tea, Miss Greaves played one of Mendelssohn's songs without words, and Mrs. Carey sang when the swallow and Mrs. Carey sung when the swallow homeward fly, or trot, trot, my pony. But the Careys did not give tea parties often. The preparation upset them. And when their guests were gone, they felt themselves exhausted. They preferred to have tea by themselves, and after tea they played backgammon. garment。哦 ，backgammon 西洋双棋，backgammon 西洋双陆棋。Mrs. Curry arranged that her husband should win because he did not like losing. They had cold supper at 8. Oh, dinner and supper. They had cold supper at 8. It was a scrappy meal because anything ready after tea. Scrappy 混乱 scrappy 嗯嗯 scrappy scrappy I didn't copy it. Control C. Yes. Let's see. Control V. Yes. Scrappy 混乱 scrappy meal because Mary Ann resented getting anything ready after tea, and Mrs. Curry helped to clear away. Mrs. Curry seldom ate more than bread and butter, with a little stewed fruit to follow, but the vicar had a slice of cold meat. Immediately after supper, Mrs. Curry rang the bell for prayers, and then Philip went to bed. He rebelled against being undressed by Mary-Ann. He rebelled against being undressed by Mary-Ann, and after a while succeeded in establishing his dress and undressed himself. At 9 o'clock, Mary-Ann brought in the eggs and the plate. Mrs. Curry wrote the date on each egg and put the number down in a book. She then took the plate basket on her arm and went upstairs. Mr. Curry continued to read one of his old books, but as the clock struck 10, he got up, put out the lamp, and followed his wife to bed. Put off the lamp and followed his wife to bed. When Philip arrived there was some difficulty in deciding on which evening he should have his bath. When Philip arrived there was some difficulty in deciding on which evening he should have his bath. It was never easy to get plenty of hot water, since the kitchen boiler did not work, and it was impossible for two persons to have a bath on the same day. The only man who had a bathroom in Blackstable was Mr. Wilson, and it was thought ostentatious of him. Ostentatious of him. Mary-Ann had her bath in the kitchen on Monday night. She liked to begin the week clean. Uncle William could not have his on Saturday because he had a heavy day before him, and he was always a little tired after a bath. So he had it on Friday. Mrs. Curry had hers on Thursday for the same reason. It looked as if Saturday would naturally indicate for Philip, but Mary-Ann said she could not keep the fire up on Saturday night, what with all the cooking, on Sunday, having to make pastry, having to make pastry, pastry 糕点哦，油酥面皮，pastry。pastry 油酥面皮 having to make pastry and she didn't know what all she didn't feel up to giving the boy his bath on Saturday night, and it was quite clear that he could not bath himself. Mrs. Curry, and of course the vicar had his sermon, but the vicar insisted that Philip should be clean and sweet for the Lord's Day. Mary Ann said she would rather go than be put upon, and after 18 years, she didn't expect to have more work given, and they might show some consideration, and Philip said he didn't want anyone to bath him, but could very well bath himself. This settled, Mary Ann said she was quite sure he wouldn't bath himself properly, and rather than he should go dirty, and not because he was going into the presence of the Lord, but because a boy obeyed a boy who wasn't properly washed. She would work herself to the bone, even if it was Saturday night. And it's settled, Mary Ann said he was quite sure properly, and rather than she should go dirty and not because he was going to the presence of the Lord, but she couldn't obey a boy who wasn't properly washed. She worked herself to the bone. Rather than go too dirty. She worked herself to the bone even if it was Saturday night. Sunday was a day crowded with incident. Mr. Curry was accustomed to say that he was the only man in his parish who worked 7 days a week. The household got up half an hour early than usual. No lying abide for a poor person. No lying abide for a poor person on the day of rest. Mr. Curry remarked as Mary Ann knocked at the door punctually at 8. It took Mrs. Curry longer to dress, and she got down to breakfast at 9, a little breathless, only just before her husband. Mr. Curry boots stood in front of the fire to warm. Prayers were longer than usual, and the breakfast more substantial. 大量的 substantial. Yeah, I already substantial, not sub.
Substantial.
Substantial. 大量的 substantial. The breakfast most substantial. After breakfast, the vicar cut thin slices of bread for the communion for the communion. 可能是那个 I think yes for the communion 交流宗教团体圣餐仪式 communion is it communion communion
Communion.
communion for the communion 圣餐仪式 After breakfast, the vicar cut thin slices of bread for the communion, and Philip was privileged to cut off the crust. Crust, 面包皮. Okay, really. Was privileged to cut off the crust. He was sent to the study to fetch a marble paperweight. He was sent to the study to fetch a marble paperweight, with which Mr. Carey pressed the bread till it was thin and puffy. He was sent to the study to fetch a marble paperweight. Oh, paperweight, I think it's 叫做正纸. Yes. Great. To fetch a marble paperweight, with which Mr. Curry pressed the bread till it was thin and pulpy. What pulpy means? Thin and pulpy, and 柔软的、稀烂的、柔软的。It was thin. Oh, okay.
Pulpy.
The privilege to cut off the crust, maybe the 柔软的、稀烂的、稀烂的。Okay. Press the bread till it was thin and pulpy, and then it was cut into small squares. The amount was regulated by the weather. The amount was regulated by the weather. On a very bad day, few people come to the amount. The amount was regulated by the weather. On a very bad day, few people come to church, and on a very fine day, though many came, few stayed for communion. There were most when it was dry enough to make the walk. There were most when it was dry enough to make the walk to church pleasant, but not so fine that people wanted to hurry away. Then Mrs. Curry brought the communion plate out of the safe, which stood in the pantry, and the vicar polished it with a camel's leather. Camel. 哦，那个羊吧。 严宁阳 ，yes， 鹿皮。山瓦
chamois,
山瓦带的鹿皮，哇哦，鹿皮，山瓦带的。And at 10, the fly drove up. At 10, the fly drove up, and Mr. Curry got into his boots. The fly drove up. Okay. At 10, the fly drove up, and Mr. Curry got into his boots. Mrs. Curry took several minutes to put on his bonnet, during which the vicar, in a voluminous cloak, stood in the hall with just such an expression on his face as would have become an early Christian about to be led into the arena. Voluminous. Let's see. It's a voluminous. Voluminous. 大的，得多大呀 ？Voluminous. In a voluminous cloak, stood in the hall with such an expression on his face as would have been an early Christian about to lead to the arena.
arena,
Arena. 竞技场舞台 arena. It was extraordinary that after 30 years of marriage, his wife could not be ready in time on Sunday morning. At last she came in black satin, 缎子 Is it satin? Oh, it is satin.
satin,
Satin, 缎子的衣服。In black satin, the vicar didn't like colors. Oh, the vicar didn't like colors in a clergyman's wife. I think clergy. Yes, clergyman.
Clergyman.
Clergy. In a clergyman's wife at any time, but on Sunday, he was determined that she would wear black. Didn't like colors in a clergyman's wife at any time, but on Sundays, he was determined that she would wear black. Now and then, in conspiracy,
Conspiracy.
conspiracy. In conspiracy with 共谋 对呀，但是不行。In conspiracy with. Now and then, in conspiracy with Miss Greaves, She wanted a white feather or a pink rose in her bonnet, but the vicar insisted that it should disappear. He said he wouldn't go to church with the Scarlet Woman. Mrs. Carey signed as a woman but obeyed as a wife. Mrs. Carey's sign was stood in the